You think you know what betrayal looks like in WWE? You think you've seen the worst that professional wrestling can offer? Then you clearly weren't watching SmackDown last night, because what Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu did to Seth Rollins was beyond brutal, it was personal, it was vicious, and it was the kind of attack that makes you question everything you thought you knew about honor and respect in this business. Seth Rollins is lying in a hospital bed right now because of what these two savages did to him, and if you think this was just another wrestling beatdown, you're dead wrong. This was a statement. This was a declaration of war. And this was Roman Reigns showing the entire WWE universe that he doesn't just want to be champion again, he wants to end careers. But here's what's going to make you absolutely furious about this whole situation. Seth Rollins walked into that SmackDown arena thinking he was going to have a normal contract signing with Cody Rhodes for their upcoming championship match. The man showed up in his best suit, ready to handle business like a professional, like the veteran superstar he's proven himself to be over the past decade. But WWE management, and I'm looking directly at you, Triple H, set him up. They knew Roman was lurking backstage. They knew Jacob Fatu was ready to unleash hell. And they put Seth in that ring like a lamb being led to slaughter. The contract signing started normally enough. Cody Rhodes was there, playing his role as the fighting champion. Seth was articulating his case for why he deserved another shot at the title. The crowd was engaged, the atmosphere was electric, and everything seemed to be building toward a standard confrontation between two championship-caliber athletes. But then the lights went out. And when they came back up, Roman Reigns was standing in the ring like he owned the place, like he had never left, like the past months of television had been nothing more than an intermission in his personal dynasty. The crowd erupted, but something was different about Roman's demeanor. This wasn't the calculated, methodical tribal chief we've seen before. This was something darker, more aggressive, more dangerous. And that's when Jacob Fatu's music hit, and the entire dynamic of SmackDown shifted into something resembling a horror movie. The Samoan werewolf stalked to the ring with murder in his eyes, and suddenly Seth Rollins found himself outnumbered 2-1 by arguably the two most physically imposing and strategically brilliant wrestlers in the entire company. But here's what's going to absolutely infuriate you about this situation: Cody Rhodes just stood there. The so-called fighting champion, the man who claims to represent everything good about professional wrestling, just watched as two predators surrounded his supposed friend and colleague. Roman grabbed a microphone and started talking about cleaning house and removing obstacles, while Jacob Fatu circled Seth like a shark sensing blood in the water. The intimidation was palpable, the threat was real, and everyone in that arena knew something terrible was about to happen. Seth, to his credit, tried to stand his ground. He grabbed his own microphone and fired back at Roman, reminding him about their history, about all the times Seth had proven himself to be Roman's equal in that ring. But you could see it in his eyes, he knew he was trapped, he knew the odds were impossible, and he knew that Roman and Jacob weren't there to talk. What happened next was 18 minutes of the most systematic, calculated violence I've ever witnessed on WWE television. And I mean systematic. This wasn't a spontaneous brawl or a heat-of-the-moment confrontation. This was two professional destroyers methodically dismantling another human being for the entertainment of thousands of people. Roman started with psychological warfare, backing Seth into the corner while Jacob cut off every escape route. They weren't rushing, they weren't sloppy, they were enjoying this. You could see the satisfaction on Roman's face as he watched fear creep into Seth's expression. The first physical contact came when Roman shoved Seth backward into Jacob's waiting arms. The Samoan werewolf immediately locked in a rear naked choke, cutting off Seth's air supply while Roman stood there explaining to the crowd why Seth needed to learn respect. But Jacob didn't just choke Seth unconscious, he held that submission for what felt like an eternity while Roman continued his verbal assault, explaining how Seth had disrespected the family and forgotten his place in the hierarchy. When Seth finally went limp in Jacob's arms, any reasonable person would have expected the attack to end. But Roman and Jacob were just getting started. They dragged Seth's unconscious body to the center of the ring and positioned him for what can only be described as a public execution. Roman removed his shirt, Jacob cracked his knuckles, and they proceeded to deliver the kind of beating that makes you question whether you're watching sports entertainment or witnessing an actual crime. Roman's Superman punch connected with Seth's jaw so hard that the sound echoed throughout the arena. Jacob followed up with a superkick that snapped Seth's head back at an angle that made everyone in attendance gasp in horror. But they still weren't finished. Roman grabbed a steel chair from ringside, and here's where this gets absolutely disgusting. He handed it to Jacob and instructed him on exactly where to strike Seth's already battered body. The chair shots weren't random or chaotic. They were targeted, precise, designed to inflict maximum damage on specific body parts. Seth's ribs, his back, his shoulders, every strike was calculated to cause lasting harm, not just temporary pain. And through it all, Roman stood there like a general commanding his army, directing Jacob's violence with the calm precision of someone who had planned every second of this assault. By the time officials finally managed to separate Roman and Jacob from Seth's motionless body, the damage was already done. Medical personnel rushed to the ring, and the sight of Seth Rollins being loaded onto a stretcher and wheeled out of the arena in silence was something that will haunt every wrestling fan who witnessed it. But here's what's going to make your blood boil. Roman grabbed the microphone one final time and addressed the crowd as if nothing had happened. He talked about sending a message to anyone who thinks they can challenge the head of the table, while Seth was being rushed to a waiting ambulance. The arrogance, the callousness, the complete lack of human empathy displayed by both Roman and Jacob in that moment was beyond anything we've seen in modern WWE programming. These weren't characters playing roles. These felt like genuine sociopaths who had just committed assault and battery on live television. Social media exploded immediately after the attack, with wrestling fans, former wrestlers, and even mainstream media outlets questioning whether WWE had gone too far with this storyline. The footage of Seth's unconscious body being stretchered out went viral within hours, sparking debates about the responsibility of entertainment companies to protect their performers. But here's the part that's going to absolutely enrage you when you really think about it: this attack wasn't spontaneous. Roman and Jacob didn't just decide to team up backstage and unleash chaos. This was planned, coordinated, and approved by WWE management. Think about the logistics involved. Roman's surprise return required coordination with production staff, lighting technicians, and audio engineers. Jacob's perfectly timed entrance needed advanced planning and rehearsal. The camera angles that captured every brutal moment of the assault were positioned by directors who knew exactly what was going to happen. WWE knew that Seth Rollins was going to be systematically destroyed on live television, and they not only allowed it to happen, they promoted it as entertainment. They sold tickets to families who thought they were going to see athletic competition, not witness what essentially amounted to a public beating. And where was security during this 18-minute assault? Where were the referees? Where were the other wrestlers who supposedly respect Seth as a colleague and friend? Everyone just stood by and watched while two men nearly ended another man's career for the sake of a storyline. The more you analyze what happened on SmackDown, the more disturbing it becomes. This wasn't wrestling, this was sanctioned violence disguised as entertainment, and every single person who could have stopped it chose to let it continue. What Roman and Jacob did to Seth Rollins on SmackDown has changed the landscape of WWE forever, and not in a good way. They've established a precedent that says any wrestler can be targeted for complete destruction if it serves the narrative purposes of more powerful performers. Seth Rollins, a man who has given 15 years of his life to WWE, who has main event WrestleManias, who has carried this company through some of its most challenging periods, was treated like expendable cannon fodder for Roman's comeback story. That should terrify every wrestler on the roster who isn't named Roman Reigns or Jacob Fatu. But here's what's even more disturbing: the crowd cheered. Thousands of people watched two men systematically assault a third man, and they enjoyed it. They chanted Roman's name while Seth was being loaded onto a stretcher. What does that say about us as a society? What does that say about what we've become as wrestling fans? WWE has created a monster in Roman Reigns, and now they've given him Jacob Fatu as his personal weapon of mass destruction. Together, These two men represent an existential threat to every other wrestler in the company, and SmackDown proved that WWE management is perfectly willing to sacrifice anyone to feed their power. This cannot stand. What happened to Seth Rollins on SmackDown was beyond the pale of acceptable entertainment, and if we as wrestling fans don't speak up now, it's only going to get worse. Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu need to face consequences for what they did. Not kayfabe consequences, not storyline repercussions, but real accountability for crossing lines that should never be crossed in professional wrestling. WWE needs to hear from us that we won't tolerate this kind of content being presented as entertainment. We won't accept watching our favorite wrestlers being brutalized for shock value. We won't support programming that glorifies violence to this extreme degree. Share this video with everyone you know who cares about wrestling. Comment below with your thoughts about how far WWE went on SmackDown. Let them know that we're paying attention, we're keeping score, and we remember when wrestling was about athletic competition rather than simulated assault and battery. The wrestling industry is at a crossroads, and what we do in response to Roman and Jacob's attack on Seth Rollins will determine what kind of product we get in the future. Make your voice heard, make your position clear, and make sure WWE understands that some lines should never be crossed, no matter how compelling the storyline might be. Because if we don't stand up for Seth Rollins now, who's going to stand up for the next wrestler who gets fed to Roman's ego and Jacob's violence? The time for action is now. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Wrestling News CC family, where the real stories of WWE come to life. See you in the next one.